The fluorescent lights hummed above, sterile and steady, cutting through the stillness of the hospital room. Sarah Hayes sat upright against the thin pillow, her back aching, her hands trembling around the tiny bundle in her arms. The baby's breath was soft, rhythmic, a fragile sound that barely seemed enough to prove she was alive. Outside, the rain tapped against the window, like a quiet metronome, counting the seconds since her world had collapsed. On the table beside her lay a crumpled note torn from a sheet of lined paper. 6 words written in a rush, pressed into her skull like a scar. I can't do this. Goodbye. No explanation, no apology, just that. Sarah had stared at those words for hours, until they blurred into meaningless lines of ink. But every time she blinked, she could still feel them etched behind her eyelids, as if her husband's cowardice had branded itself into her heart. The baby whimpered a small instinctive sound. Sarah forced herself to look down. A face, so impossibly new, so vulnerable, peeked out from the folds of the blanket. Tiny fists curled beside flushed cheeks. The sight made Sarah's chest tighten until she could barely breathe. She whispered through cracked lips, "You don't deserve this, sweetheart." Her voice broke on the last word. There should have been laughter, balloons, family, a father's hand reaching out to hold theirs. But there was only her barely 28, exhausted, bleeding alone. She had worked until the very last week of pregnancy, typing one-handed on her laptop, determined not to let her personal life ruin her position at Grayson Enterprises. She believed in control in order in keeping things together. But nothing prepared her for the stillness of that room, the echo of abandonment that followed her into motherhood. She rocked the baby gently, trying to calm her shaking. "It's okay," Hope she murmured, naming her child for the first time out loud. "We'll figure it out, somehow." But the name caught in her throat. Hope. It felt like a lie she wasn't strong enough to believe in yet. The door creaked suddenly. Sarah froze, her heart stumbling. For a fleeting moment, she imagined Nathan had come back, that maybe he'd realized what he'd done, that maybe this nightmare was reversible. But when she looked up, she saw not her husband, not her mother, not anyone she expected. It was him, Liam Grayson, the billionaire CEO, the man whose signature could change markets, whose name made interns whisper in elevators. He looked completely out of place in that narrow hospital doorway, his tailored coat soaked from the rain, a coffee cup trembling slightly in his hand. Sarah's mouth went dry. "Mr. Grayson," he stepped forward slowly, closing the door behind him with quiet care. "Sarah." Her name on his lips startled her. No one in the office ever heard him speak it like that, softly, like it mattered. "I heard you were here," he said, his voice low, a little uneven. "My assistant told me you went into labor yesterday. I tried to visit earlier, but they said the room was restricted." She blinked, unsure what to say. "You didn't have to." "I know." He hesitated, setting the coffee on the bedside table. "I wanted to." There was no arrogance in his tone, none of the sharpness she'd come to associate with him. Instead, there was something almost fragile, as if he wasn't sure what to do with his hands, with his presence, with the raw ache hanging in the air. The silence between them stretched. The monitor beeped softly. Sarah looked away, embarrassed by her own tears. "Where's your husband?" Liam asked gently. She stiffened. He noticed immediately. "I'm sorry. That was too direct." Her fingers tightened on the blanket. "He's not here." He studied her face, something flickering behind his steel blue eyes. "I see." Liam sat on the empty chair beside the bed, the one meant for a father who never came back. His presence was quiet but grounding, like a wall built between her and the storm outside. He glanced at the baby. She's beautiful. Sarah swallowed hard. Her name's Hope. Hope, he repeated softly, as if testing the weight of it. That suits her. For a moment she almost smiled, but the exhaustion hit her again, dragging her eyes half shut. Liam noticed. Without asking, he reached for the spare hospital blanket folded at the foot of the bed and draped it gently over her legs. Sarah tensed. No one had touched her with kindness since the contractions began. The simple act, the warmth of it, cracked something open in her chest. "Why are you here, Mr. Grayson?" she whispered. He hesitated before answering. "Because 2 months ago I saw you cry in the elevator." Her eyes snapped up. "You thought you were alone," he continued quietly. "But I was there. You stood in the corner holding your stomach, trying not to fall apart. And I didn't say anything." Sarah stared at him, unable to speak. That night had been one of her lowest, after the first fight with Nathan about the baby after he told her he wasn't ready. She had broken down between floors 12 and 14, certain no one had noticed. "I should have asked if you were okay," Liam said. "I've thought about that a lot since then." Tears welled in her eyes. She turned away, pressing her lips to Hope's forehead. "People always think I'm strong," she whispered more to herself than to him. "But I'm so tired of being strong." Liam leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice barely above a breath. "You don't have to be tonight." Something in the way he said it, steady, certain, made her chest ache. Sarah looked at him, truly looked. He wasn't the untouchable man from the boardroom. He looked human, his hair damp, his jaw shadowed from a sleepless night, a small tremor running through his hands. "Who told you I had the baby?" she asked. "My assistant, Clara. She mentioned you didn't come to work all week. When I checked the records, I found the hospital. You checked, I was worried." He hesitated, and I don't know why that scared me. Sarah let out a shaky laugh. "You barely talk to anyone at the office." "That's true." A hint of a smile tugged at his lips. "Maybe that's the problem." For a fleeting second, something warm passed between them, a fragile thread neither of them understood yet. Then from the hallway, a distant baby cried. A nurse's footsteps echoed and faded. The world moved on outside uncaring, but inside that small room, time seemed to pause. Liam stood and walked toward the window. Rain streaked down the glass, reflecting the city lights below, cold, endless, alive. "When my sister gave birth," he said suddenly, his back to her. "The whole family was there. Parents, husband, friends. I didn't realize until tonight how rare that is." Sarah didn't respond. Her throat tightened. He turned to face her, his eyes softer now. "You're not alone, Sarah. Not anymore." The words hit deeper than he intended. She looked down at Hope, then back at him. "I don't even know how to start over," she admitted. "You don't have to," he said. "You just start with her." Hope stirred, letting out a tiny sigh, and Sarah exhaled, as if releasing years of breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The rain began to slow. Liam took a step toward the door, pausing before he left. "I'll check on you tomorrow," he said. "You don't have to." He looked back at her. "I know." And then he was gone. Sarah stared after him, the sound of his footsteps fading down the sterile corridor. For the first time since Nathan left, she didn't feel the crushing weight of emptiness pressing against her ribs. It wasn't comfort, not yet, but it was something close. She looked down at the sleeping baby in her arms. Hope's tiny hand had slipped free of the blanket, curling around Sarah's finger. The warmth was startling, grounding. Outside, the storm cleared, leaving streaks of light across the window pane. Sarah whispered to her daughter, "Maybe we'll be okay." But as she leaned back, letting her eyes close for just a moment, she didn't notice the flicker of movement in the glass, a reflection of a man standing at the far end of the hallway, watching through the narrow window in the door. The same man who had left the note. He stood there for only a second, before turning away, disappearing into the rain. And in the faint reflection of the corridor lights, Hope stirred again, her tiny cry breaking the silence, signaling the start of something neither of them could yet name. The world outside the hospital was a blur of gray and gold when Sarah stepped into it again. Rain had washed the city clean, leaving the streets glistening under the early morning sun. The air smelled like new beginnings, if such things even existed. Liam waited beside the car, hands in his pockets, posture steady. He wasn't wearing his usual suit, just a dark sweater and jeans, but somehow he still looked like the kind of man who belonged to a different world. One of glass towers and boardrooms. Not hers. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, her voice thin, still raw from the hospital air. He glanced at her eyes, unreadable. "You and Hope need a place that's safe. That's all this is." The baby stirred in her arms, tiny lips twitching as if sensing her mother's hesitation. Safe. The word felt foreign. Sarah had lived in apartments where walls shook with traffic, where the hum of fear was something you learned to sleep through. Safe wasn't a place. It was a myth she stopped believing in the moment her husband walked out. But when Liam opened the car door for her, something in his quiet, steady movements made her step forward. The drive was long and wordless. Hope slept through the entire ride, her small breaths rising and falling like waves against Sarah's chest. Liam drove without speaking, his eyes fixed ahead, his knuckles pale against the steering wheel. Occasionally he glanced at the rearview mirror, checking the baby seat in the back. It was strange, the same man who once terrified an entire office floor with a single frown was now checking if an infant's head was tilted too far to the left. When the car finally turned off the main road, Sarah blinked. The noise of the city vanished, replaced by the soft rustle of wind through trees. A narrow lane opened before them, lined with jasmine bushes, spilling their white blossoms across wooden fences. At the end of the lane stood a small house painted cream and gold, wrapped in ivy. "This is it," Liam said quietly. It wasn't the mansion she'd expected from a man like him. It was smaller, humbler, almost tender. A porch swing creaked gently in the wind. The scent of jasmine drifted through the air, delicate and calming. Sarah stepped out slowly, clutching Hope close. "You live here?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, the main house is on the hill." He pointed to a distant silhouette, half hidden by oaks. "This was my mother's guest house. I've kept it as it was." She turned toward him. "And you're sure I can stay here for as long as you need?" he said. His tone was simple, matter of fact, but there was something beneath it, a quiet insistence, like he wasn't just offering a roof, but a promise. Inside, the air was warm and faintly scented with lavender. Wooden floors gleamed under soft afternoon light. A tiny living room opened to a kitchen filled with sunlight. And near the window stood a brand new crib, its tag still hanging from one rail. Sarah froze. "You bought this?" Liam rubbed the back of his neck, almost sheepish. "I had my assistant help. I wasn't sure what to get, so I got everything." She turned slowly, eyes landing on a changing table. A set of neatly folded baby clothes, a stack of formula boxes. "You really didn't have to," she said softly. He gave a faint smile. "Maybe not. But it didn't feel right for you to come home to an empty room." Something inside her cracked, then not from pain, but from the unfamiliar weight of kindness. She set Hope gently into the crib and traced her fingers over the smooth wood. "It's beautiful," she murmured. Liam looked at the sleeping child, then back at Sarah. So is she. Their eyes met for just a heartbeat too long, too deep, and Sarah had to look away. The day passed quietly. Sarah unpacked what little she had, a hospital tote, a few clothes, her baby's first blanket. Everything she owned now fit into one corner of this borrowed space. Liam lingered long enough to fix the window latch, to test the lock on the front door twice. Then he left her to rest. But rest didn't come. The silence felt heavy pressing against her chest. The hospital had been full of sound machines, footsteps, voices. Here there was only stillness and the rhythmic breathing of her child. Sarah sat by the window, watching the golden light fade to blue. Hope slept soundly, tiny fingers twitching in dreams. When the door creaked open hours later, she startled. Liam stood there carrying a grocery bag and an uncertain expression. "I thought you might need dinner," he said. "I told you you don't have to." Consider it a neighborly gesture. He set the bag down on the counter, pulling out soup, fresh bread, a carton of milk, and oddly, a small stuffed giraffe. Sarah couldn't help it. She laughed. A giraffe. He looked almost defensive. "I read babies respond to animal toys. I didn't know which one to choose." Her laughter softened the air between them. For the first time in days, her face lit up with something other than exhaustion. "Thank you," she said quietly. Liam shrugged. "It's nothing." But the way his gaze lingered on her said it wasn't nothing at all. That night after dinner, Sarah found herself awake again, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator and Hope's gentle breathing. Through the half-open door, she could see Liam sitting at the kitchen table under the dim light, sleeves rolled up, studying a baby formula guide like it was a board report. He was muttering to himself, frowning as he measured out ounces in a bottle. It was such a simple human image, a man used to commanding empires now struggling with a plastic cap, that Sarah's throat tightened. She'd spent months imagining power as the opposite of tenderness. Yet here was proof that the two could coexist awkwardly beautifully. She leaned against the doorframe, watching him unseen. "Should I add one more scoop?" he muttered, reading the tiny print. "Depends who you're feeding," she said softly. Liam looked up startled. "You should be asleep." "I can't," she admitted, stepping closer. "Every time she sighs, I think something's wrong." He smiled faintly. "That doesn't go away, apparently. My sister says she still checks her son's breathing at night, and he's 8. Sarah chuckled, then sank into the chair across from him. "You have a sister," had he said after a moment. "She passed 3 years ago." Her breath caught. "I'm sorry." He nodded, looking at the formula packet again, his jaw tight. "She had a complicated pregnancy. I wasn't there enough. I thought sending money was the same as showing up." There it was, the first glimpse of the man beneath the steel. Sarah whispered, "You don't seem like someone who forgets things easily." "I don't," he said. "That's the problem." They sat in silence for a long time, the night stretching between them. Finally, Hope stirred from the next room. Sarah rose instinctively, but Liam stopped her with a gentle gesture. "Let me try." She hesitated, watching as he walked toward the crib, his steps careful, reverent. He lifted the baby, awkward at first, then steadier. Hope blinked up at him, utterly unafraid. Liam's entire expression shifted, every edge, every wall softened. "She's lighter than I expected," he murmured. Sarah smiled. "She carries her weight differently." He looked at her confused. "She carries my heart," she said simply. Something unspoken passed between them, then heavy and electric. Liam handed Hope back his fingers, brushing Sarah's hand. Just a fleeting touch, but enough to send a spark racing up her arm. She held her daughter close, pretending not to notice how his eyes lingered a moment too long. "Get some rest," he said finally, his voice lower, softer. You'll need your strength. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. When the door closed behind him, the quiet returned, but it no longer felt suffocating. She stood by the window watching him through the curtain as he crossed the garden, the lamplight tracing his silhouette. He paused once, looking back at the house, as if to make sure she was still there. Then he disappeared into the darkness. Sarah turned toward Hope's crib. The baby was already asleep, her lips curved in the faintest smile. You have no idea, Sarah whispered, brushing her daughter's cheek, how strange and kind the world just became. She sat by the crib for a long time, the jasmine-scented air weaving through the room. And for the first time since giving birth, she felt something unfamiliar, yet steady, taking root inside her, an echo of the word she had chosen for her child. Hope. But outside, beyond the glow of the garden lights, a shadow lingered near the fence, motionless, watching. It moved once, just enough to catch the faint shimmer of metal in the moonlight. Then it was gone. Sarah never saw it. She only felt a sudden chill crawl down her spine, as if some unseen part of her already knew peace was never meant to last. The morning began quietly. Sunlight filtered through the curtains of the guest house, stretching across the wooden floor in thin golden ribbons. Sarah stood in the kitchen, her robe loosely tied, hair pulled into a messy bun, measuring formula into a small bottle. The rhythmic sound of Hope's soft fussing filled the room. She moved with the fragile grace of exhaustion, not the sharp kind that broke you, but the kind that settled in your bones and refused to leave. Yet even through the haze, there was peace. For the first time in months, she felt it. Liam had gone out early, or so she thought, leaving a note on the counter, checking on the estate staff. Back soon. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, the same way he ran his life. Sarah smiled, faintly, glancing toward the crib in the living room. It's just us, baby girl, she whispered. Just us and the quiet. But the quiet didn't last. A sharp knock rattled the door. Once, twice. Hope stirred. Sarah frowned, her hands freezing mid-motion. No one ever came here without Liam. He'd made sure of that. Another knock, louder this time. She set the bottle down, heart skipping, and walked to the door. Her fingers hesitated on the handle. Through the glass, she could see a shape, tall, broad-shouldered. For a heartbeat, her mind whispered, Liam. But when the light shifted, everything inside her went cold. Nathan, her husband, or the man who used to be. He stood on the porch as if the months between them had been a dream. Clean-shaven, neatly dressed, a man rehearsing the role of calm. But the paper clutched in his hand trembled slightly. Sarah, he said. She didn't move, didn't open the door, just stared. What are you doing here? He exhaled, holding up the document. I came to make it official. What? Divorce, he said. Voice flat, almost bored. And custody. I'm signing away my parental rights. The words struck her like a physical blow. You're what? He glanced past her to the crib inside. You've got things handled. You don't need me. For a moment, the only sound was Hope's small, sleepy coo, the sound of a child already being erased from her father's life. Sarah's hands shook. You walked out on us, Nathan. You didn't even look at her. And now you think you can just... I'm trying to do the right thing, he interrupted sharply. The right thing? Her voice cracked. Since when does leaving become the right thing? Nathan's jaw tightened. I'm not here to fight. Then why come at all? He didn't answer. His gaze shifted uneasy, as if the house itself made him nervous. Then she noticed movement behind him, a woman stepping out from a sleek black car. Blonde, elegant, perfectly poised. She placed a careful hand on Nathan's arm. "Who is she?" Sarah whispered, though the answer had already bloomed like poison. "Her name's Claire," he said quickly. She's new. Sarah finished for him. "Congratulations." Nathan's eyes flickered with something between guilt and pride. "It's complicated." "No," she said quietly. "It's actually very simple." Behind her, a soft knock came from the hallway. Liam's voice, calm even. Sarah Nathan stiffened. "Who's that?" Liam stepped into view, casual but deliberate. His presence filled the doorway without effort, the way gravity filled a room. His eyes went from Sarah's pale face to Nathan's clenched fists, then to the woman by the car. "Is there a problem here?" Nathan laughed under his breath. "I guess I shouldn't be surprised. You always did have a type, Sarah, men who want to rescue you." Liam didn't rise to it. "You left her. That makes you irrelevant to what happens next. I'm her husband." Where Liam said the single word sharp as glass, Sarah swallowed hard. "Nathan, please. Just sign the papers and go." But Nathan wasn't looking at her anymore. His gaze was fixed on Liam, calculating, assessing. "You think you can play family now? With my wife and my kid?" "She stopped being your wife the moment you walked away," Liam replied evenly. "And she's not your kid anymore by your own choice." Nathan's face twitched, rage and shame fighting for control. "You don't know anything about us." "I know enough," Liam said. "I know you left her bleeding in a hospital bed while she begged you to stay. I know you let your fear destroy something you'll regret for the rest of your life." Sarah closed her eyes, the truth of it cutting deeper than any insult. She didn't want them to fight. She didn't want any of this. "Nathan," she said softly, stepping forward, "do what you came to do." He looked at her, really looked for the first time since he left. Maybe he expected tears. Maybe he wanted them. But there was nothing left to take. She opened the door wider. "Sign it. Then go back to the life you chose." The pen scratched against paper. A signature. A name crossed out of someone's story. When he finished, he placed the pages on the counter next to the half-filled baby bottle. "You always were stronger than me," he said quietly. "No," Sarah whispered. "I just stopped waiting for you to be." He hesitated, but the woman on the porch touched his arm again, and just like that, he turned and left. The door closed behind him with a sound like finality. Sarah stood there for a long moment, staring at the divorce papers. They looked so ordinary, white, crisp, unfeeling, and yet they carried the weight of everything she'd lost. Liam stayed silent. Then carefully he reached out and touched her shoulder, not to comfort, but to anchor. "You did the hardest thing a person can do," he said quietly. "You let go of what hurt you." Her throat tightened. "It doesn't feel brave. It never does in the moment." She turned to face him, eyes shining with unshed tears. "He taught me to love by leaving. You taught me something else." "What's that?" "To stand without shaking." Liam's gaze softened. "You're stronger than anyone I've ever met." For the first time, Sarah believed it. Not because he said it, but because she felt it deep in the quiet center of herself that had survived everything. Hope stirred from her crib, a tiny sigh escaping her lips. Sarah walked over, lifting her daughter, gently pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You're safe now," she murmured. Liam watched her from the doorway, the morning light tracing the curve of her face. Something warm stirred inside him, something he hadn't dared name in years. He wanted to say it out loud, that she wasn't alone, that he wasn't just helping out of duty. But the words stayed in his chest, locked behind the fear of what they might mean. Outside, a breeze swept through the garden, carrying the scent of jasmine through the open window. The world looked peaceful again, but peace was fragile, always fragile. Sarah set Hope back down and turned to Liam. "Thank you for being here." He gave a quiet nod. "You don't have to thank me." "I do," she said softly, "because no one ever stayed before." Liam's jaw tightened and he looked away. "Then I guess it's about time someone did." Later, when the house had fallen silent again, Sarah found herself sitting alone by the window, the signed papers tucked into a drawer. She should have felt relief, but instead she felt the strange stillness that follows a storm. She traced her thumb along the edge of the wooden frame, staring out into the fading daylight. Somewhere out there, Nathan was already moving on, but she wasn't angry anymore, just free. Then she noticed something a-flicker by the fence, a shadow moving where no one should be. Her breath caught. It was gone as quickly as it appeared. She pressed a hand to her chest, steadying her heartbeat. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just the wind. But when she turned back toward the crib, Liam was already standing in the doorway again, his expression alert, unreadable. "Did you see something?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "By the fence." He glanced toward the window, his shoulders tensing. "I'll take a look." "Liam." "It's fine," he said gently, though his tone carried a different message. "It's not fine at all." He stepped outside the screen door creaking behind him. The garden was still too still. Sarah watched through the glass as he disappeared into the shadows, the last rays of sunlight fading behind him. For a moment she thought she saw movement again, a figure retreating down the road, tall and deliberate. And though she couldn't see the face, something deep in her gut whispered a truth she didn't want to believe. Nathan wasn't gone. Not really. And whatever he'd left behind, guilt, anger, or something darker, wasn't finished with them yet. The night was quiet, too quiet for the edges of Sarah's nerves. The kind of silence that didn't comfort but watched. Hope was asleep in her crib, one small hand clutching the corner of a pink blanket. The rhythmic rise and fall of her chest should have soothed Sarah, but something felt off. It wasn't the wind outside, nor the creak of the old floorboards. It was stillness, the kind that waits. She stood by the window, mug of tea cooling in her hand, and looked out at the garden. The jasmine vines shimmered under the moonlight, moving faintly in the breeze. The world looked serene until something shifted at the edge of the fence. A shadow, tall, motionless. Her breath hitched. The mug slipped from her fingers, landing on the carpet without a sound, the tea spreading like a dark halo. For a heartbeat, she couldn't move. Her body froze before her mind caught up. Then the shape leaned slightly, just enough for her to know it wasn't a trick of light. Someone was out there, watching. Hope stirred behind her, making a small noise as if sensing her mother's fear. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. She stepped back from the window, closing the curtains in a rush. Her fingers trembled as she checked the lock, then the back door, then the nursery window. Everything was sealed, but her skin crawled with the certainty that she wasn't imagining it. When the front door finally opened, she nearly screamed. Liam stepped inside, shaking off his jacket, his face shadowed with fatigue. "Sarah." She exhaled, pressing a hand to her chest. "You scared me." His brows knitted. "What happened?" She swallowed. "Someone was out there, by the fence. I saw him." Liam's entire demeanor shifted, calm, turning to focus softness to steel. "Did you see his face?" She shook her head. "No, just tall, dark clothes, standing still." He was already moving, grabbing a flashlight from the cabinet, his phone in the other hand. "Stay inside. Lock the door. Liam." "Please, Sarah." His tone was gentle but final. She obeyed, shutting the door behind him. Through the curtain, she saw the beam of his flashlight slicing through the dark. He moved methodically, checking the gate, the hedges, the perimeter. Minutes crawled by like hours. Finally, the door opened again. Liam's expression told her everything before he spoke. Nothing. No footprints, no movement. But I've called for an additional guard to patrol this side tonight. She nodded, trying to calm the tremor in her hands. Maybe I overreacted. He met her eyes. You didn't. When she tried to apologize again, he stopped her with a faint smile. A mother who worries isn't paranoid, Sarah. It's instinct, survival. Don't ever apologize for that. His voice, steady, grounded, pulled her back from the edge. She felt the words settle somewhere deep inside her chest, warm and quiet. They stood there for a moment, the space between them charged, not with fear, but with something else. Trust. Later, after the guards arrived, Liam insisted on staying until she felt safe. The house glowed in the low light of the kitchen lamp. Outside, the night hummed with crickets, but the silence no longer pressed. He found 2 plates, reheated the leftovers she'd made earlier, and set the table. Eat, he said simply. Sarah hesitated, then sat across from him. The first few bites were wordless. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until now, or how grounding it felt to do something so ordinary. Eat, breathe, exist, in the presence of someone who wasn't leaving. Liam leaned back in his chair. You haven't had a full meal in days. She gave a small laugh. I forgot what it feels like to be taken care of. You don't have to earn rest. Sarah, he said quietly. She looked up, startled by the softness in his tone. You talk like you know what exhaustion feels like. He smiled faintly. I do, but mine's always been a choice. Yours wasn't. His words hung between them, simple but heavy, with empathy. Sarah looked down at her plate, her throat tightening. No one had ever said it like that before. After a while, she whispered, I keep thinking I'll wake up and he'll still be gone, that the silence will swallow me again. Liam's gaze softened. Maybe the silence is trying to tell you something. She frowned. What? That you've made it through the noise. The line made her chest ache in a way she didn't expect. She looked at him, really looked, this man who had every reason to stay detached, yet kept showing up anyway. Why do you care so much? She asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached across the table, setting his hand over hers. His touch was steady, warm, because someone should have cared sooner. The sincerity in his voice broke her. Sarah blinked back tears, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from something gentler, recognition. Hope's faint cry cut through the moment, grounding them both. Sarah stood quickly, moving to the nursery. Liam followed silently, leaning in the doorway as she lifted the baby. Shh, it's okay, Sarah murmured, rocking her daughter. Liam watched her in the soft glow of the lamp, her hair falling loose around her face, her tired eyes lit with tenderness. It was a sight that did something to him, something unfamiliar and terrifyingly human. You're good with her, he said. Sarah smiled weakly. She doesn't know I'm still figuring everything out. Liam stepped closer. No one ever really figures it out. We just love them enough to keep trying. Their eyes met, a quiet understanding passing between them. Sarah looked down at Hope. She's the only thing I've done right. Liam hesitated. That's not true. When she looked at him again, he wasn't the distant CEO or the rescuer anymore. He was just a man standing under the amber light of a room that suddenly felt too small for what they weren't saying. Hours later, after Hope had fallen back asleep, Sarah walked into the living room. The air was cooler now. The clock ticked softly. Liam was still there, sitting on the couch, typing on his phone. Security confirmed nothing unusual, he said without looking up. They'll stay on rotation overnight. Thank you, she murmured. He finally looked at her. "You're shaking." "I'm fine," she lied. He stood, closing the distance between them. "Sarah." The way he said her name made something inside her unravel. She didn't realize she was crying until his thumb brushed away a tear. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't even know why." "You don't need a reason." His voice was quiet but steady, the kind of calm that steadies others first. She stepped back, slightly embarrassed, but his hand lingered near hers, just enough to let her know she wasn't alone in the room. "I hate that I'm this person," she admitted, jumping at shadows. He shook his head. "The shadows remind us we're still afraid of losing something that matters." "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "Maybe not," he said softly. "But it's the truth." Her lips curved just barely. "You're terrible at comfort." He smiled, then small and real. "I'm better at protection. I'm starting to notice." A silence fell again, different this time. Not heavy, just full. Sarah looked toward the window, the one she'd drawn the curtains over earlier. The faintest hint of moonlight leaked through the edges. She could still feel the fear from before, but it had dulled, replaced by something steadier. Maybe she'd never be fearless. But maybe she didn't need to be, not when someone was willing to stand beside her in the dark. "Liam," she said suddenly, surprising even herself. "When you found me at the hospital, why did you really come?" He studied her for a long moment. "Because you looked like someone who still had a story left to tell." Her breath caught. "And what if I don't know how to tell it?" "Then we'll find the words together." The answer hung in the air, gentle and dangerous all at once. Hope murmured from the other room, and Sarah smiled through her tears. "She's probably dreaming." "Of what?" "Of tomorrow," Sarah said quietly. Liam looked at her for a long moment before nodding. "Then I'll make sure it's a good one." Later, when the lights dimmed and the house fell asleep, a wind swept through the garden, carrying the faint scent of jasmine through the cracks of the window. Sarah stirred in bed, reaching instinctively toward the crib. Hope was still there, safe, breathing softly. But outside, the faint outline of a figure lingered near the tree line, watching the glow of the house. He moved closer to the fence, this time the silver edge of a ring catching the moonlight. Nathan. His eyes followed the shadow of the man, moving inside the one who had taken his place at her table in her world. And under his breath, too low for anyone to hear, he whispered, "This isn't over." Morning sunlight streamed across the kitchen, spilling warmth over the small wooden table where Sarah sat half asleep, her hair a tangled halo of soft curls. Hope babbled from her high chair, tiny fists reaching for the spoon in her mother's hand. "Patience, little one," Sarah said, through a sleepy smile. Across the room, Liam was crouched beside a small pile of baby supplies, diapers, powder wipes, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. For a man who'd once negotiated billion-dollar contracts without blinking, he looked entirely out of his depth now. "Remind me again," he said, holding up the diaper like it was a blueprint. "Which end is?" "The front." Sarah laughed, the sound like sunlight breaking through clouds. "You're serious." "I'm detail-oriented, not diaper-oriented," he muttered, turning it over as if there might be instructions printed somewhere. She shook her head, crossing the room to help him. "Here, you fold it this way. Then hold her legs gently, not like you're handling a stock certificate." Liam shot her a mock glare but did as told. Hope wriggled, giggling, while he tried to fasten the tabs with hands that trembled more than he'd admit. "You've faced down entire boards of directors," Sarah teased, "but you're terrified of a 7-pound baby." "Correction," he said, managing to secure the last tab without incident. "She's the most valuable asset I've ever held." Sarah froze, eyes flicking to him. He caught the look and smiled, not realizing how deeply those words had landed. "Asset," she echoed softly. He straightened, noticing her tone. "Bad choice of words," he said gently. "I meant she's priceless." The tension dissolved into laughter, pure and unguarded. For the first time in what felt like forever, the air between them wasn't weighed down by fear or loss. Just quiet joy. Hope squealed, waving her arms, and Liam looked at her like she was a miracle he hadn't earned. Sarah watched him, realizing with a pang that the man she'd once thought untouchable now looked entirely human and entirely hers. Later that afternoon, sunlight shimmered through the leaves as Sarah stepped out into the garden. The jasmine was in bloom again, filling the air with its delicate perfume. She loved this moment, the brief lull between feeding, cleaning, and the soft chaos of motherhood. It was her favorite kind of quiet. She bent down to collect the baby clothes from the drying rack and froze. Something white was tucked beneath the fence, a folded piece of paper, edges damp with dew. For a second she thought it was a flyer or some note from the groundskeeper. But when she pulled it free and saw her name written across the front, Sarah, her breath caught. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. "Sarah, please talk to me. I made a mistake." The words blurred as her pulse thundered in her ears. She didn't need a signature to know. Nathan. The ground felt unsteady beneath her. The garden, once her refuge, suddenly seemed smaller, trapped. Her fingers crumpled the paper, her heart slamming against her ribs. He had been here. On this property. Close enough to touch the fence, close enough to know where she lived. A noise behind her made her jump. Liam stepped out from the kitchen doorway, coffee in hand, his expression soft until he saw her face. "What is it?" She held up the note wordlessly. His entire body went still. He took it from her, reading the words once, twice. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, dangerous, in its control. "When did you find this?" "Just now." "Did you see anyone?" She shook her head. "No, but he was here, Liam. He found us." He looked toward the fence, scanning the trees beyond. His jaw tightened. "He's testing boundaries." Sarah's voice trembled. "Why now? Why after everything?" "Because he's losing control," Liam said. "Men like him always come back, but not for love. For ownership." The words sliced through her. He wasn't wrong. "I'll talk to security." Liam continued, his tone shifting to that clipped, efficient rhythm she'd once only heard in meetings. "We'll add motion sensors on this side, cameras by the garden, a guard rotation every 2 hours. Liam." He turned back to her, his expression softening. "You don't have to live afraid anymore. Not of him, not of anyone." Sarah blinked back tears. "I don't want Hope to grow up in a house full of fear." "She won't," he said, stepping closer. "Because she has you, and because I won't let anyone touch either of you." His hand brushed her arm, a touch so light, yet grounding. For a long moment they stood there, in the sunlight, surrounded by the faint scent of jasmine and the soft coos of the baby inside. Sarah wanted to believe him, to believe that love, even the quiet, cautious kind, could be stronger than fear. But when she looked past Liam's shoulder, she caught a glint in the distance. Something metallic. Something watching. That night, sleep came slowly. Sarah lay awake, listening to Hope's breathing through the baby monitor, the rhythmic hum of fragile comfort. Beside her, the shadows on the wall moved with every flicker of the garden lights outside. Liam had stayed late again, speaking with the head of security, installing new locks. She'd told him not to worry, that Nathan's note might have been a desperate act, not a threat. But even as she said it, she didn't believe herself. When she finally drifted off, She dreamed of doors left open, of footsteps behind her, of voices whispering her name through the dark. A crash jolted her awake. She sat upright, breath caught. The sound had come from outside metal against gravel. Her mind screamed Nathan, but then she heard Liam's voice, steady calm, calling out commands to the night guards. She rushed to the window. Below, in the glow of the security lights, Liam stood with two men inspecting the outer fence. One of the cameras had been ripped from its mount wires, hanging loose like torn veins. "Who would do that?" she whispered. When Liam came back inside, his jaw was set. It wasn't an accident. Someone knew exactly where to hit the feed. "You think it was him?" "I think he's watching," Liam said. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself. "How can you be so calm?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. "Because fear gives him power, and I won't let him have it." His conviction steadied her. He was like gravity, something she could lean against when the world felt like it might tip over. But even gravity couldn't stop the chill that crawled up her spine when she turned toward the window again. Beyond the light's reach, past the trees, she thought she saw the faint outline of a man. Camera, raised lens gleaming like an unblinking eye. And then he was gone. The next morning, sunlight felt almost intrusive, too bright, against the remnants of a sleepless night. Sarah sat by the window. Hope nestled in her lap, while Liam spoke in hushed tones on the phone nearby. "Yes," he said. "I want every file you can find on Nathan Hayes. Associates' phone records, financial movements." Discreetly. Sarah looked up. "Liam, you can't, I can," he said quietly. "And I will. He's already crossed one line. I need to know how far he's willing to go." "This isn't business," she said, her voice trembling. "This is my life." His gaze met hers, full of something fierce and unspoken. "That's exactly why I won't treat it like business." Hope cooed softly, breaking the tension. Sarah kissed the top of her daughter's head, her eyes still locked on Liam. "You can't protect us from everything," she whispered. "Maybe not," he said, "but I can make damn sure he never hurts you again." For a moment neither spoke. The air between them buzzed with a current of fear, and something deeper, something that felt dangerously like love. Sarah stood and walked toward him, closing the space that had always seemed so impossible between them. "You don't have to fix this, Liam." He looked at her, voice low. "I don't want to fix it. I just want to keep you standing." It was too much, too kind, too close. She turned away, blinking fast. Through the open door, a breeze carried the faint scent of jasmine inside, mingling with the warmth of the morning sun. For the first time, Sarah realized this house wasn't just a refuge anymore. It was something more fragile, more sacred. A home for three. And somewhere beyond the fence line, hidden in the glare of daylight, a camera clicked once, capturing them through the glass. The sound was faint, almost lost to the wind. But the photograph it produced would find its way hours later into the hands of someone who smiled as he looked at it. Nathan's voice, low and deliberate, broke the silence of the car he sat in. "She thinks she's safe," he murmured. "Let's see how long that lasts." The sky had been restless all day, low clouds rolling across the horizon, heavy and gray, as if the world itself was holding its breath. By nightfall, thunder rumbled over the valley. The jasmine in the garden bent under the rising wind petals, scattering like snow. Inside the guest house, Sarah stood by the crib, adjusting Hope's blanket. Liam had been on the phone for hours, his voice low and clipped, dealing with something he wouldn't explain. She didn't ask. She'd learned by now that some silences meant protection. Still, something in his tone had unsettled her, a shadow in his words. "Storm's getting worse," she called softly. He looked up from his laptop, eyes tired, but alert. It'll pass. But even as he said it, the wind howled, rattling the shutters. Lightning slashed across the window, painting his face in sharp, ghostly light. Sarah hugged herself. Feels like the world's coming apart. He stood, walked over, and gently touched her arm. Nothing's coming apart, he said. You and Hope are safe. That's all that matters. She wanted to believe him. Hours later, the power flickered. Once, twice. Then darkness swallowed the house whole. Liam. I'm here. His voice came from across the room, steady but tight. Backup generator should kick in soon. But it didn't. The air felt different now, thick, charged. Rain hammered against the windows, and somewhere, a tree branch cracked. Hope began to whimper in her crib, sensing the tension in the air. Sarah reached for her flashlight and froze. A sound. Soft, metallic. The unmistakable click of a door latch. Liam, she whispered. That wasn't the storm. He heard it too. His body went rigid. Stay with Hope. She could barely breathe. What's happening? Someone's here. Before she could respond, another noise tore through the darkness, the shattering crash of glass from the living room. The wind roared in through the broken window, scattering papers and rain. Liam moved fast. He grabbed the gun from the drawer, the one he'd sworn he'd never need, and motioned for her to get down. Go, he said quietly but firmly. Safe room. Now. Sarah clutched Hope against her chest, her pulse pounding in her ears. She wanted to argue, to say she wouldn't leave him. But then, another sound cut through the storm, a man's voice, low and cold. Been a long time, Grayson. The name made Liam freeze. He turned toward the sound, rage flickering in his eyes. Cole Maddox. Sarah had heard the name once before, an investor turned enemy, the man who'd lost everything after Liam exposed his corruption. She'd never imagined he'd come here. Cole's shadow loomed in the doorway, rain dripping from his coat. His smile was sharp, predatory. You took everything from me, Liam. Your turn now. Don't do this, Liam said. There's a child here. Cole laughed, stepping closer. Even better. Something to lose. Sarah's stomach twisted. She backed toward the hallway, whispering. Liam, go, he snapped. The storm outside seemed to answer him, thunder cracking loud enough to shake the glass. She ran, holding Hope tight, the baby crying into her shoulder. Behind her, she heard the scuffle, the sound of fists of furniture toppling, of glass shattering again. She reached the panic room door, hidden behind the nursery wall. Her hands fumbled on the keypad, heart pounding. The door slid open with a mechanical hiss. She stepped inside, clutching her child to her chest. Hope's cries echoed in the small space. Shh, baby, it's okay, Sarah whispered, though she didn't believe it. It's okay. Through the crack in the door, she could hear Liam's voice, low, furious, defiant. You think this will fix what you ruined? This isn't about fixing, Cole snarled. It's about ending. There was a gunshot. Sarah screamed, clapping her hand over her mouth a second too late. Footsteps thundered down the hall. She pressed the control to seal the panic room, but before it shut completely, a hand gripped the frame. Liam. He stumbled inside, drenched blood streaking down his arm. He slammed the door shut, just as another bullet struck the wall outside. Are you hit? She gasped. Just grazed, he said, breathless. He's not here for money, Sarah. He's here for me. Hope cried louder, terrified by the sound. Liam dropped to his knees beside them, wrapping his good arm around both mother and child. He won't get through that door, he said. I promise you. Sarah's voice trembled. You promised that before. He met her gaze. No defensiveness this time, Just quiet truth. I'll keep it this time. Outside, the storm raged, lightning flashing like camera shutters against the small security screen inside the room. Cole's shadow moved through the house, methodical, deliberate, destroying everything in his path. He's burning it, Liam muttered, as the smoke alarms began to wail. He's setting fire to the place. Sarah's throat closed. What do we do? Liam hit the emergency beacon, the red light flashing on the console. Police will trace the signal. Will they be fast enough? They have to be. He tried to sound certain, but his voice shook. Sarah pressed Hope closer, whispering a prayer she didn't remember learning. The air grew thick with the smell of smoke. The child coughed once, and that sound, small, helpless, shattered the last of Liam's restraint. He pulled Sarah close, his forehead against hers. Listen to me, he said urgently. If it comes to it, you take her and run. Don't wait for me. She shook her head fiercely. No, we stay together. Sarah, don't you dare finish that sentence. Her voice broke, but her eyes burned with fire. You don't get to make the choice of who gets left behind. He stared at her, something fierce and unspoken moving between them. Then faintly sirens. Hope whimpered again, and Liam let out a shaky laugh of relief. They're coming. Outside, Cole's voice echoed through the smoke. You can't hide forever. Grayson. Watch me, Liam murmured. The red light on the console blinked faster. The sirens grew louder. Cole must have seen them because the next sound was his curse, then the slam of the front door as he fled into the night. Liam exhaled the adrenaline, leaving his body all at once. He slumped back against the wall, clutching his injured arm. When the police finally broke through, the storm had already begun to ease. The officers escorted them out into the rain-soaked garden. The house was ruined. Windows, shattered, smoke curling from broken beams, water pooling across the floors. Sarah turned in circles, disoriented by the destruction. The place that had sheltered her had been ripped apart in one night. But Hope was alive. She looked at Liam, his white shirt soaked and streaked with blood. His eyes were hollow, but when they met hers, there was still something there, something unbroken. You should have let me call for help sooner, she whispered. I had to know you were safe first. Liam, her voice cracked. You can't keep doing this, throwing yourself between me and the world. He stepped closer, rain dripping from his hair, his expression raw. I don't need to protect you forever, he said quietly. Just long enough for you to stop being afraid. Her lips trembled. And what about you? He smiled faintly. I stopped being afraid the moment I met you. The rain fell harder, but neither of them moved. In the distance, blue lights flashed against the trees. Officers moved through the property, securing the perimeter, collecting evidence. One of them approached Liam, saying something about Cole Maddox and warrants. But Sarah barely heard. She was looking past the fence to where the trees met the road. And there, just for an instant, she saw another figure watching. Not Cole. Nathan. He stood in the shadows, an umbrella over his head, expression unreadable. Then, as if satisfied, he turned and disappeared down the road. Sarah's breath caught. The storm had ended, but the danger hadn't. Hours later, after the police left, Liam and Sarah sat in the back of an ambulance, Hope asleep between them. Liam's hand brushed hers, tentative, steady. It's over, he said softly. But she shook her head. No, she whispered, eyes still on the dark horizon. It's just changing shape. He followed her gaze, saw nothing but rain and wind. Yet deep down, he knew she was right. The storm outside had passed, but somewhere another was already forming. 3 weeks after the night of fire and glass, the world began to breathe again. The air carried the scent of wet earth and jasmine, the kind that follows a storm too heavy to name. The garden, once torn apart by chaos, now glowed beneath the soft light of early morning. Flowers leaned toward the sun leaves, still jeweled with rain. Inside the small guest house, laughter replaced sirens. Hope lay on a soft blanket spread across the floor, kicking her legs, babbling at her reflection in a shiny rattle. Every few seconds, she rolled to one side, then back again, as if rehearsing her first crawl. Sarah knelt nearby, her fingers tracing small circles on her daughter's back. "You're getting stronger every day," she whispered. "You won't remember the dark, my love. Only this light." Her voice trembled on the word light. Behind her, Liam watched from the porch doorway, his arms still bandaged from the night Cole broke into their lives. The bruises had faded, but something in his eyes had changed, softer now, quieter. The man who had once ruled skyscrapers and boardrooms now found peace in the rhythm of a child's laugh. He stepped closer, his shadow falling beside hers. "She's fearless," he murmured. Sarah smiled, though her eyes were rimmed with fatigue. "Maybe she gets that from you." "Doubtful. I still check the locks twice before sleeping." Her laugh came easily this time. The sound filled the small house like sunlight chasing away the lingering ghosts. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was Hope's delighted squeal as she managed to roll over fully for the first time. Sarah clapped softly, tears glimmering in her eyes. Liam crouched beside her, his hand brushing hers as he reached for the baby's toy. "You realize she'll outgrow this place soon." Sarah tilted her head. "The house." He nodded. The fear. The words hung between them, fragile and luminous. Cole Maddox had been arrested a week earlier, captured 2 towns over, while trying to flee the country. The police report was clinical, detached, full of words like arson and attempted assault. But to Sarah, it read like an ending. Yet endings, she was learning, rarely came clean. She still woke in the middle of the night, sometimes heart racing at the echo of gunfire that no longer existed. Sometimes she'd find Liam sitting by the window, staring into the dark, as if keeping watch for ghosts that refused to let go. He never said it, but she knew he blamed himself. That morning, though, as sunlight touched everything it once burned, Sarah felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but space for it to exist. She watched Liam as he settled beside her, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his hands rough and healing. "Do you ever think about going back?" she asked quietly. He looked at her, puzzled. "Back where?" "To the life you had before all this." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You mean the life that almost killed me?" "You were good at it," she said. "I was good at pretending," he replied. Their eyes met, and something unspoken flickered between them, recognition. He leaned back on his palms, staring at the sky. "I used to think success was about control. The perfect building, the perfect deal. Then one night it all burned down, and I realized control's just fear, dressed in a better suit." Sarah smiled faintly. "So what's freedom dressed as?" He glanced at her, sunlight catching the corners of his eyes. "You maybe." Her breath caught. "Me," he shrugged lightly. "You keep choosing to stay even when it hurts. That's freedom." She looked down, blinking fast. "I didn't stay for courage. I stayed because running stopped working. That's still a choice," he said gently. The silence that followed was not heavy. It was full, alive. Hope reached up suddenly, her tiny hand brushing Liam's wrist. He froze, then smiled, curling his larger fingers around hers. It was such a small thing, and yet it unraveled everything inside him. "She trusts me," he murmured almost to himself. "She knows you're her safe place." Sarah said. He turned to her. And what about you? The question settled between them, like the soft hush before rain. I'm learning, she said finally. For a long time, safety meant being invisible. Now it feels like being seen and still being loved. Liam's hand found hers, tentative but certain. Then I'll stay where you can see me. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time since her world fell apart, she let herself imagine what a future might look like if she stopped fighting to survive it. By afternoon, the sky cleared completely. The air was warm, carrying the scent of grass and sunlight. Sarah brought out a picnic blanket while Liam prepared coffee. Hope squealed as the breeze brushed her face, her laughter bubbling like song. It felt almost normal. Almost. Sarah leaned back against the porch post, watching the light play through the leaves. She'll walk here one day, she said softly, under this sun across this garden, and she won't remember the night it burned. Liam's gaze followed hers. No, he said quietly. She'll only know that when the world fell apart, her mother built something stronger from the pieces. Her throat tightened. You make it sound easy. It isn't, he admitted, but nothing real ever is. He set down his cup and turned to her. Where do you want to go, Sarah? When you're ready to start over, really start. She hesitated, the question catching her off guard. I don't know. I'll go with you, he said simply. She blinked. You'd leave everything behind. The company, your work, I already did, he said, voice soft but certain. For something I can't rebuild if I lose it. What's that? You and her. He nodded toward Hope, who was now asleep on the blanket, cheeks pink from the sun. Two people who remind me I'm still human. Sarah tried to speak, but her voice broke halfway through a breath. Tears welled in her eyes, uninvited but gentle this time. Liam, she whispered, you don't owe us anything. He reached over, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Maybe not, but I want to, and that's worth more than everything I ever owned. The simplicity of it undid her. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his shoulder. He froze for a second, then exhaled his hand, finding the back of her head, steady and warm. For a long moment, the world was nothing but heartbeats and wind. When she finally pulled back, her voice was barely a whisper. We're not a normal family. He smiled. Good. Normal's overrated. She laughed through her tears, the sound small and bright. That evening, after the sun dipped behind the hills, the three of them sat on the porch, wrapped in a shared quiet that didn't need words. Hope slept between them, her tiny breaths steady. Sarah looked out at the horizon, streaked in gold and violet. I used to think happiness was something you had to earn, she said softly. Now I think it's something you learn to let in. Liam nodded. You've earned that too. She turned to him, her eyes shining with the reflection of the fading light. And what about you? What will you do now? He smiled faintly. Whatever comes next, as long as it's honest. Their fingers intertwined again, naturally this time without hesitation. The world around them was quiet, but it no longer felt empty. No titles, no walls, no fear. Just three souls who had survived the fire and chosen to stay in the light. From the edge of the property, a figure watched. Hidden by the lengthening shadows, he lowered the camera from his face. Nathan's expression was unreadable, part anger, part something that looked like longing. The photograph he'd just taken showed Sarah laughing in the sunlight, Hope reaching for Liam's hand. He stared at it for a long time, thumb brushing over her image. Then, under his breath, almost tenderly, he said, She was supposed to build that life with me. As the last of the light disappeared, he pocketed the camera and turned away. Some storms he thought never really end. The morning sunlight came quietly soft and golden, brushing across the white curtains like a whisper. Sarah stirred awake to the faint cooing of hope, the baby's laughter echoing from the crib like music too pure for the world. She sat up slowly, the warmth of peace, still unfamiliar, but welcome. The storm was gone, not just the one outside, but the one inside her chest. When she turned toward the doorway, Liam was standing there. He wasn't wearing his usual pressed shirt or the face of the man who once commanded boardrooms. He looked different, calm, unguarded, holding a small velvet box in his hands. Sarah blinked. "Liam, what's that?" He smiled softly, walking closer until the morning light framed him in gold. "A reminder," he said simply. Her heart began to race. "Are you proposing?" He shook his head. "No," he murmured. "This isn't a promise for the future. It's proof of what's already here." He opened the box. Inside, nestled on dark velvet, was a small golden locket engraved with a single word, "Ours." Sarah's breath hitched. For a long moment she said nothing, just stared, the light catching in her tears. Liam spoke again, voice low, steady and utterly sincere. "I'm not asking you to marry me, Sarah. I'm asking you to keep choosing me the way you choose hope, the way you choose to stay alive, to keep believing." Her lips trembled. "You think I chose you?" His gaze softened. "You did. Every time you let me in. Every time you didn't push me away, when you could have." Sarah laughed through her tears. "You sound so sure." "I am," he said, smiling faintly, "because I've spent my whole life chasing things that belonged to no one, buildings, power, titles. But this—" He gestured toward her, toward the room bathed in morning light, toward Hope's small hands, reaching for the world. "This is the first thing that's ever truly felt like mine." Her tears fell freely now. "Ours," she corrected. He nodded, emotion flickering across his face. "Ours." Hope gurgled from the crib, drawing their attention. The baby's eyes sparkled as she kicked her feet, reaching toward them. Sarah lifted her daughter, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "See, my love," she whispered. The world gave us a second beginning. Liam slipped the chain around Sarah's neck, his fingers brushing against her skin. She closed her eyes as the locket rested over her heart. "Do you like it?" he asked softly. She nodded, voice barely a whisper. "It feels like home." Liam's smile was quiet, full of warmth. "That's what I wanted it to be." For a long while, the three of them just stayed there, the baby babbling, the sunlight spilling over the floor, the sound of their laughter rising above the stillness. For the first time in a long time, Sarah didn't feel like she was surviving. She was living. Later that day, they walked through the garden. The jasmine had bloomed again, its fragrance heavy and alive. Sarah watched Hope stretch out her tiny hand toward a butterfly, her laughter echoing like wind chimes. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked suddenly. "Miss what?" Liam replied. "The world before this, the company, the constant motion, the control." He thought for a moment. "Sometimes. But then I remember how quiet it was, how success never filled the silence." She smiled, brushing her fingers against the flowers. "And now," he said, glancing at her, "the silence finally feels right." Sarah stopped walking, turning to face him. "You gave up everything, Liam." He shook his head. "No," he said gently. "I let go of everything I mistook for everything." She laughed softly. You sound like a philosopher. He grinned. No, just a man who almost lost what mattered. Her hand found his. It fit there easily, like something that had always been meant to return. That evening, the light shifted, the kind of sunset that turns the sky to gold and the heart to forgiveness. Sarah sat on the porch, Hope asleep against her chest, while Liam brought out 2 mugs of tea. He set one down beside her and sat quietly for a while, watching the last traces of sunlight slip behind the hills. She'll never know what we went through, Sarah said softly. Not really. She'll know enough, Liam replied. She'll know strength. She'll know that when her world broke, her mother rebuilt it. Sarah looked at him. And what about you? She'll know I stayed, he said simply. The simplicity of it broke her. She reached for his hand again, her thumb tracing the scar on his wrist, a mark left from that night of smoke and glass. You could have walked away after everything. I thought about it, he admitted. Then I realized I'd already found where I was meant to be. She met his eyes, her voice barely a breath. Here. He nodded. Here. With you. When Hope stirred, Sarah carried her inside. Liam followed, stopping at the doorway to watch the soft hum of lullabies, the rhythmic sway of Sarah's silhouette, the glow of lamplight on the locket around her neck. Something in that image, mother and child peace after chaos, seared itself into him. As Sarah laid Hope gently in the crib, she turned to find him watching. What she asked with a shy smile. He shook his head. Nothing. Just, I didn't think I'd ever get to see something like this. Her laughter was soft, almost shy. You saved us, Liam. No, he said quietly, walking closer. You saved yourself. I just stayed long enough to witness it. She looked at him for a long moment, the man who had entered her life through grief and stayed through the wreckage. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. He smiled. You already did. When you opened the door that first day. Sarah blinked back tears. Then promise me one thing. Anything. Don't stop opening it either. He nodded once, his hand brushing against the locket over her heart. Not unless you tell me to. The next morning arrived like grace. Sunlight poured through the windows, scattering across the floor, where Hope crawled toward her reflection on the glass. Sarah stood in the kitchen making coffee, her fingers tracing the pendant absent-mindedly. Behind her, Liam walked in quietly, slipping his arms around her waist. Morning, he murmured against her hair. She smiled. You're up early. Couldn't sleep. Why not? He hesitated, then said, Because I didn't want to miss this. She turned in his arms, meeting his gaze. This? He nodded. The sound of her laughter, the smell of your coffee, the way the light hits this place in the morning. Her heart ached, the kind of ache that comes from realizing you've finally found what you were always searching for. He took her hand and led her back to the living room, where Hope now sat in a patch of sun, giggling at nothing at all. Sarah sank to the floor beside her daughter, the light warm on her skin. Liam knelt beside them, reaching out to brush Hope's curls away from her eyes. She's perfect, he said softly. Sarah looked up at him, smiling. So are we imperfectly perfect? He laughed under his breath. That's one way to put it. She touched his cheek. This isn't the life I expected. Good, he whispered. The expected ones never change you. Hope reached up then, her tiny fingers brushing the golden locket on Sarah's chest. See that, Sarah said, her voice trembling. It means this us is ours. Hope babbled happily in response, as if understanding. And in that moment, surrounded by sunlight, laughter, and the quiet certainty of love, Sarah realized something she hadn't dared to before. Home wasn't a place she had lost. It was something she had finally built. The strength of a woman doesn't lie in never falling, but in how she still opens her arms to life, even after being left behind. And if this story touched you, take a moment today to tell someone they are not alone. The end. Or perhaps the beginning.